All right, folks, thanks so much for coming to Huddle this week. We got some interesting topics to talk about, and we will likely end the session reviewing our buyer-broker agreement and discussing the situations around that, just so we're more familiar with it than we were when we started, hopefully. And, we haven't, those are our kind of core documents, and it's one we haven't reviewed for quite some time, so it's probably a good time to do it. But before we begin, there's been some interesting stuff happen in one of my offices that I think everybody should be aware of. And this happened just a couple of days ago, and it involves thank goodness it's attempted wire fraud. So this is your, I don't know how often we tell you about this, but this is your hopefully frequent reminder to have a very real discussion with your clients about the wire fraud doc. It's I know from a lot of people's perspective that it's sort of, it's one of those documents that we put in front of people and sometimes you don't even explain. I could see why people may not even explain it, but just say, hey, read over those docs. Let me know if you have any concerns. But I will tell you that from my perspective, it's one of those things where when it does matter, the person's life has been destroyed and it's sort of too late. And who cares if they sign the wire fraud doc because their life's been destroyed, kind of a situation. And in this instance, our agent had what he informs me, he says, yeah, I really had a conversation about the wire fraud and what to look out for. And my guess is that, he may have saved them $325,000. So here's what happened. We don't actually know who was compromised in the situation, but it's looking like the lender was likely compromised in the situation. And so how it unfolded was that our client got some wire instructions from the lender, and that was a little slightly odd that because it's not every day you get those instructions from your lender on where to send the money. But fortunately, soon thereafter, they got an email from the title company. And because hopefully it was because of us, or it doesn't matter why, it was whose reason was, the client checked the wire instructions and they did not match. Thank goodness. And so that's where the digging started. And it didn't take much work. It didn't take much digging. So whoever had this information definitely knew the approximate amounts that were involved in cash that were very likely to be due from a wire transfer. They definitely knew who all the parties involved were. So the title company, the agent, and as it turns out, the lender was the correct one. The lender's email contained correct information. And it was the title company. And the title company, because of how these emails were formed, the title company wasn't compromised. So when the email came through, obviously the title of the email was the name of the title officer, the escrow officer. But all you had to do was click on those and look at those email addresses, and you quickly understand that no one at Metro Title email ends in @AOL.com. And in fact, if your email does end at AOL.com, I get it. There's a lot of great nostalgia there. But I think it's time that we upgrade our email handle there. Anyway, not to divert here, but the other one was planetcampbell.us. And I will say that the scammer was clever enough to know that when they CC'd all the parties involved, which, that makes sense. When you send some wire instructions, you're going to include all the parties involved so everybody's on the same page. The scammer was clever enough to make fake email addresses for every party involved. So if there was a reply all, every reply was probably coming back to email addresses that they controlled and obviously created for this scamming purpose. So we don't know how yet. I don't know that we're ever going to discover how they learned of this information. But the amount was for about $325,000, and so it's been cleared up, and we escaped. we escaped. But this is another really good reminder that you have to have a real serious conversation with your clients and always give them the instruction that no matter who the email comes from, no matter even, let's just pretend for a second that these emails came directly from the email addresses of the parties involved. It has happened before, and it will happen again, that somebody is hacking these emails, monitoring the activity in the emails, and at the right time, literally sending an email from the exact account, from the real account, with fake email, fake wire instructions. Okay, that's how deep this can go. So the only instruction that's appropriate for us is to tell our clients, before you wire any money, you make phone calls, you verify, you have other people repeat back to you what those wire instructions are, and you talk to me too. You talk to your real estate agent to make sure that the right people are the right people. And also, like, we just have to be extra careful. And I don't think I need to repeat that, AI is making this so much easier for the scammers to execute these things, so much easier, which is frightening. But there's still plenty of good measures in place to throw up some barriers to make it that much more difficult. So anyway, does anybody have any questions, suggestions, or comments they'd like to throw in there on that situation? Because yes, it's a little bit scary. Just a little bit scary. And that is, we haven't, I'm sure if all the brokers got together in a 12-month period in our brokerage, I'm sure that we've dealt with this half a dozen, maybe a dozen times. And you're like, well, that's not very many times for how many transactions our entire brokerage does. That's true. But can you imagine how you'll feel if your client fell victim to this and their life savings is gone in an instant? And the chances of them getting that money back is just, I can't imagine that there's any real probability that they get that money back. So feeling pretty good we prevented it, and feeling pretty good that the client noticed and took that extra step to be careful about their wire transfer. Okay. I think that's all I got to say about that. Here's another issue. Let's talk about, this is sort of a housekeeping brokerage issue for a second. This has to do with earnest money and the deposit of earnest money, because we've had some close calls. We've been fortunate, but we've had some close calls with earnest money. And it specifically relates to earnest money that's been deposited by our clients in the form of a check or in the form of, a money order or whatnot, and not. So everything other than a wire transfer. So the situation occurs, they deposit it, and, 6 or 7 days later, the deal cancels and they want their money back. Okay. And so, there's no reason for us to hold the money other than $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 earnest money checks don't clear, or potentially may not clear in that amount of time. And so when we give them that money back, the short end of the stick is the brokerage potentially. So we've avoided some close calls. So just know that if your client won't wire that earnest money, if the client won't wire the earnest money, just know that we have like a 10-day grace period, no matter what, in order for that money to clear and actually hit our bank account. Because we won't issue any refunds until then. And quite frankly, I can understand why your clients may be upset. Like, hey, I gave you 10 grand. I want my 10 grand back now. I gave it to you. Well, we don't even have it. Yeah. And Scott, your question is really what brings this topic up. Even cashier's checks. Yeah. Like we're sort of at a point now where, with how the banks handle the clearance of all this money, like in order for us to protect ourselves, we got to have those 10 days from the day it's deposited. So, I would, and we've all, and you're going like, well, I get the cashier's check. It's the exceptions where it seems obvious that we've almost been burned. That's the reason why we're sort of going back on because we've always had this policy, and there's some obvious, there's some what seem rather apparent situations where we should just give that money back immediately. It's those rather apparent situations that are shot across the bow, making us a little nervous about that amount of money. So, yeah, there you have it. Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, it's 10 business days. Business days. Thank you. That's a good clarification, because that could lead to, 12 days, 2 weeks in their minds, and that's not some short period of time. Okay, I think that handles that. One of the topics that we've been talking about that have come up a few times, and I really would appreciate some audience participation here and some comments or feedback on this subject, because I think it's a kind of an important one, and it is in regards to the use of our time by our clients, and specifically how we set some boundaries in regards to buyers, and how much of our time they actually get. And you're like, Mike, well, they hired us, they should get, we don't have in our contracts how much time that they get of ours. We just say we're going to help them solve this real estate problem. And that's true. That's absolutely true. But a really good question was posed to me the other day at the end of our sales meeting. We're kind of just chatting before we break. And this agent says, well, I had this buyer who is a really great person, and they have a set of requirements that seems pretty clear about what they want. And over 3 years, I've showed 40 homes, and I know it's 40 because I keep track of every single home I show them, and I count it, and it's 40 homes, and I'm at my wit's end. And it's a unique situation, and doesn't actually have the clearest of answers. I mean, some of you are like, I know what my answer is, and for you, it's clear. But there's the attitude that, hey, I've already invested so much time, I don't want to waste that time that I invented. That would be the sunk cost fallacy. But that's kind of real. Like, I've invested this time. I see that there is potential for me to actually help them and actually close a deal and actually earn some money and actually get paid for the work I've put in. But there's also the perspective that, their behavior in the past may potentially predict their behavior in the future. And if that's the case, then I'm going to spend a whole heck of a lot more time and show a lot more houses and still not get paid. So both of those perspectives to me are very understandable, and I think it's a really good subject to talk about our boundaries as real estate agents, how much time we should dedicate, and if you should have one of those serious talks and when you should have it. My perspective is that, as with almost any of the issues that we talk about in Huddle, prevention is the best medicine here. So if we do a really good buyer's presentation, I think we can handle a lot of at a minimum, if we do a good buyer's presentation, we have something to fall back on. And we can say stuff like, we can use terms like, hey, if you'll recall during the buyer's presentation, I told you this, that, and the other. And that's why I kind of want to sit down again and rehab this conversation because of where we're at. Let's think about our individual markets, and let's think about, there's so many people. I look at all these names on the Zoom right now. There is a massive amount of experience. There are thousands of homes that have been walked through and shown on this Zoom call. And how many unique homes have you really walked through in your life? Not that many. There's not that many homes that really are like, this home, that one's exceptionally unique. It's in an exceptional location, has exceptional design. You just can't find that anywhere. They do exist, but they're few and far between. And quite frankly, the vast majority of what we're looking at and our clients' descriptions, in my opinion, my own personal, you can have whatever you're on, my own personal rule of thumb is 20 homes. At 20 homes, you should probably have a real sit down and rediscuss, maybe even represent some portions of your buyer presentation to reset the process. Because at 20 homes, in my opinion, they've seen all the neighborhoods they've requested. They've seen every home in that price range that's available, and they've chosen that they don't want those. And you could easily predict that in the future, very similar homes in that geography will still appear with very similar price tags and very little difference. And if there is a difference, it'll be nuanced and not significant. Does anybody disagree with that assessment, by the way? Like maybe you're in a smaller market and you can't see the different variety of homes, or in 20 homes find that type of home that your client is requesting. Does anybody agree or disagree with that, my own personal assessment there? Bill gives me a thumbs up. Bill's with me on this one. Yeah, I think...
Hey, Mike, I have a comment.
Please do.
I'm jumping in late, but it just made me think of a client. What you just think of a client that had it. I went off. We had a from another area. So we talked about different areas, drove to different areas. I really them. I was showing them what was that they.
Hey, hold on one second, Linda. Is she choppy to everybody else, her audio? Linda, I think you need to pull your computer closer so your microphone can hear you better, maybe.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we can hear you. It's just choppy.
Okay. Finally, I said, I need you guys to go home. Husband, write what you want. Wife, write what you want. You guys agree on it. We'll show you houses again. I gave them homework.
Oh, okay. You're still slightly choppy, but here I'll repeat back to you what I believe the point that you were making, that you had basically shown a number of homes and you brought the clients back and basically gave them homework to reassess what they're really looking at and maybe review the homes that you've already seen. I think that's actually really great advice, because to a large degree, it's not a problem we can really solve ourselves, is it? The only ability we have is to ask the right questions in order for them to come to their own conclusions, to discover their own desires is really where our power lies. And so I like that solution, that when you do come back and you do reassess where you're at, you review the homes that you've already looked at. And this is also maybe a good time to talk about, when you're going through these homes, maybe you take a few notes about their reaction or comments they made, if it's positive, right? If they show some interest, maybe we need to take a few notes as a reminder. And I think there's some habit already formed in a lot of you that do that, because, you walk through the home once and in 4 days they may decide, hey, we're writing an offer on that. And it's been 4 days and you've also been through 7 other homes. And, if your memory's like mine, you're going to really struggle to remember the stuff, so you took some good notes or whatnot. But yeah, I think that's a really good example of one of the conversations that you should have. You need a real reset here. So if your clients aren't making decisions and you've gone through, 4 homes that should meet their needs but somehow don't, your clients are telling you without telling you, I don't really know what I want, or they know what they want but they haven't told you. They know exactly what they want, but they haven't communicated it well, or you don't understand it. And in these instances, I would suggest that this conversation shouldn't be over a phone call. You should go to their house and go, hey, I think it's time. It's been 2 months and 20 homes later, and we haven't found you what you wanted. Let's sit down and talk about it again. One, it's a really great chance to reconnect, because maybe, after 20 homes and however much time, they may be feeling some negative type of way about you too, because there's no easier person on the planet to shove your problems off on to as a real estate agent. I mean, you're just so easy to do that. Good news, Linda was able then to find the perfect home for them. This is, again, a conversation that I definitely think you should have in person. And reviewing, I think, in order to really provide and buttress the value that you've already created, a review of everything you've done and the homes that you've walked through and when you started this is appropriate. It may seem like long-winded, it may seem like a waste of time, but to remind them that, yeah, I'm personally putting in real work here. I know that you are too, but I've scheduling these showings, and I do a lot of work behind the scenes, just so you know. And here's what we've done so far. Here's what we've looked at. And here's the homes that you've definitely said you don't want, because I kept good notes. Here's the homes that you said you might have interest in, but you eventually tossed to the side. And then these 2 homes, we kind of played around with the idea that we might write an offer, but ultimately decided that we wouldn't. I think that type of rehash of the past is appropriate, and I think it would be really valuable to you to reestablish a really good relationship with your client. And also, it makes them think about everything that's happened. And yeah, as Linda says in the chat, deep dive questions. And maybe we're just re-asking the same questions that we asked in our initial buyer consultation. And if we have to, it would be up to us to go, okay, so your needs are X, Y, and Z. In my opinion, these 3 homes that we walk through meet that. But I'm not the home buyer. My opinion doesn't necessarily matter at all. So can you explain to me why I'm wrong to help get some better clarity, to help me understand what you're looking for? Now the problem's theirs, right? The problem is now theirs for them to deal with in order to explain away why the homes that potentially meet their requirements don't meet their requirements. Because you don't understand why they don't. You haven't been communicated in a way that would provide that example. So I think that's an activity that's well worth your while and garners a really good sit down. In another scenario too, like another really good scenario that's closely related, another agent brought to me, and I'll repeat these requirements because everyone here will get a good chuckle out of it. So the client wants, how will we describe it? An older home, a classic home, a really good craftsman, just how they used to make it type of thing. But we don't want asbestos. We don't want lead paint. We don't want steel pipes. We don't want every single feature that they use to build this home with. Okay? So they want the old home, but nothing that goes with the old home. Nothing that you would have to repair, nothing that would, prevent them from living in a new home. So what they really want is a new home that looks like an old home, and that just doesn't happen, right? And which is a really good, and I didn't explain that very well, so let's see. I don't think she's on here. She could explain it better. But her explanation is a lot better, and by the time she's done with it, you're like, well, some of those homes do exist, and those homes have $300,000 dumped into them to make them that way. And in some markets, those homes exist, but, you can't justify putting $300,000 into a home like that. Some markets you can. And in this particular market, the answer is no. No one's putting, they're basically got to gut the entire house and build it from, not the ground up, but inside, just completely gut the inside and redo it. That's the strategy. And there's just not that many of those homes available, if any at all. And so, which is a description of people who have unrealistic expectations. Buyers with unrealistic expectations. There's a lot of really great, clever ways to handle buyers like this. And if you have a good way to handle a buyer like this, throw it in the chat, unmute yourself. Feel free to contribute. My voice does get to sound a little odd after 30 minutes, so, jump right in. Anyway, if your buyer has some unrealistic expectations, my strategy would always be, and I repeat this all the time, and I just said it already in this huddle, no one learns better when they come to their own conclusion, okay? And so in every scenario, instead of saying, if you look at this, sorry, lights, motion sensor, if you look at this property, this doesn't meet your needs, right? You can present a situation like that. But you just have to reverse the same scenario and make it a question. So, maybe in her scenario, in her situation, she would gather every single home that's on the market or sold in the last 6 or 7 months and just go through them and say, in the last 6 months, the homes that are in your design range, let's just call it design range, or era in which you prefer, the 20s or the 30s or the 40s or the 50s or whatever style they're looking for. we have that information. That's one thing that we do have. We have that great information. And we need to compile a report for their review, and we need to sit down, because if you just give it to them, you know, we're the experts on this subject, so we need to be present as they review this information, in my opinion. Because if you just give it to them, they're going to come to the same, they're going to find what they want. Okay? But if you sit down with them and you go over this and say, so these 3 homes sold, you know, they are of the era, but I don't know. I think it probably has asbestos. What do you think? Like, even if the answer's obvious, you still got to ask them their opinion. You still got to ask the questions so they answer the questions out loud and force them to come to the conclusion that is obvious, right? But that's not always the easiest thing to do. And, you know, but I will say, if the situation is tough enough, we've shown enough homes, or the requirements are bizarre enough, there is a moment in which we need a reset. And we just talked about that. The more extreme situation, like when we talked about this in the sales meeting about the client who'd seen 40 homes and seemingly had exactly what they wanted, my opinion was that, you know, we sit down and we lay out the terms in which we, the real estate agent, are willing to move forward. And if they don't agree with that, then we need to cut them loose. We're not the agent for you. I don't think I can help you. Because at some point we have to have some self-preservation here. We have to protect our own sanity and especially our own time. And as much as we may like somebody and we really want to help them, or that we feel like, you know what, I've already worked really hard, I know I can earn a commission here, the bottom line is we have to protect ourselves and have boundaries. And we, at some point in time, you have to push hard enough to say, hey, I can't work with you anymore. Cindy says, when I have a client who is sending me 10 listings to see, I tell them, because of limited time, pick your top 5 to see on this trip. Those other 5 listings usually are never discussed again. That's a really cool strategy. And that's a really good example of how you protect your time and also how you set future expectations and interactions with your clients. And so a good example of Cindy's scenario would be if you do a good buyer presentation, you go, hey, listen, if you send me a home on a Friday, the chances that, you know, you send me a home on Friday at 4 o'clock, the chances that we're walking through Saturday at 8 a.m. are slim, and you should never have that expectation. You should always give me 24 hours of time at a minimum in order to plan your showings. Stuff like that is what can help preserve your sanity. And if you don't say that, is it really our client's fault when they say, hey, I want to see 19 homes Saturday? It's not their fault. They don't have any perspective on what you have to do to schedule those. The time and effort it takes for the people that live there have to get out. Like, they don't have any of this perspective. It's our job to set boundaries and expectations. And so I love that plan, Cindy, because yeah, there's a bit of a that's one of the many things we have to look out for, that looky-loo, like, hey, I'm in the shopping mode, so I would never buy these, but it'd be interesting to walk through them. I mean, you're the only one that it would be interesting for. Everybody else would be miserable. So anyway, I like that suggestion, Cindy. Thank you. All right, so what do y'all think about that? Anybody like to add anything, contribute before we move on?
Yeah, Mike, I've got a unique situation with a out-of-state client. They come to town once a year, see about 10 to 15 houses per trip. We're on year 3, and the wife's a Berkshire agent.
That's almost worse. It's almost worse because she knows better, but she doesn't care. Yeah, that's a rough scenario. But I would also think if you're on year 3, you've seen 45 homes. So I don't know that there's any scenario in which someone could, like, one of my agents could come up to me and I would say, your entire job is to convince me why you should keep working with these people under the current conditions. And if you led with, I've shown them 45 homes, you would have a hell of a time convincing me that the status quo should continue.
Well, there's always an excuse of why we got to wait another year.
Mm-hmm.
The last one is the husband turned 70 later this year, and I can start collecting my full maximum benefit from Social Security, and I'll be ready to move at that point. So we'll see what happens come January.
Well, it is very well known that you can't collect your full benefits unless you move after. You buy a home after. Very well known. You got to buy real estate after in order to collect those full benefits. I don't know. It's all confusing, government and whatnot.
But I thought, you'd get a good laugh. At least it was partial family with Berkshire.
Yeah, it is a real problem. There's plenty of people that will, and in your situation, Bob, I could see where, one time a year I got to spend a weekend with some clients. That's different than having a constant, hey, we're still always looking. Well, these people can't look until they come into town. But I would guess, though, that there's a couple months of lead up before they come in. They probably ask you how the market's doing. They probably do all sorts of stuff in order to prepare.
Conversation once a month with the husband, and the wife goes through all of the real scout that's sent to her, and she's making comments on them all, so she's involved. But
Yeah, and so this is, to me, Bob, this is a really good scenario in which you need to, I would guess that you've already set some boundaries, and I would also guess that they probably don't care. And the other real estate agent doesn't care. And it's a good time to reset those boundaries. And maybe the boundary reset is making them reaffirm their real commitment to buy here. And go through, this is the fourth year. This is 4 years.
Well, during all of this, the husband's brother has moved and relocated and retired in St. George, so I feel he'll eventually get here. So it's kind of tough to sit there and kick him to the curb.
Well, Nate, and these are really good. We all have different values of our time and how we want to spend it, and we always all should. But remember, Bob, it's never too late to. You don't have to kick them to the curb, and I wouldn't even recommend that you do that in this scenario. But it may be worth your time to do something like, hey, should we just only look at, should I turn that Real Scout feed off until, maybe 2 weeks before you get here? Because there's no use looking at homes when they'll be gone before you even get here.
Oh, yeah.
Take some benefit away, take that thing away and make some more urgency, or just slightly disrupt your current habit in order to hopefully, potentially, cross our fingers, create a new one. But yeah, I
think the first quarter of 2027, there'll be a buyer at that point.
Man, you're going to love that paycheck when it comes, Bob.
Oh, yeah.
That's one thing that is just really negative about getting your money, just like direct deposited. And can you imagine how much more exciting a real estate closing it would be if you showed up to the office and we gave you a little baggie of cash? Oh my goodness. Holy cow. We might even have to have a private room so you could just go in there with your money for a minute. Maybe all you do is smell it. I don't know. It's up to you. It's just your own thing. Yeah, throw it around, wash your hair with it. It would be it is exciting to see the money in your bank account. There's no question that feels really good. But and I do have this experience. Has anybody held $100,000 in their hand at one time? Cash. Bill has. It feels amazing, doesn't it, Bill? There's something to it. I will say that there's no one I'll ever meet that has handled more money than me. Nobody. I know people who might have, but in a single day, I would frequently handle hundreds of thousands of dollars in my prior life. So it does, even though it's not mine. I would be thrown in jail immediately. They would have caught me so fast. I never stole a dime. But I could dream and fantasize while I rubbed those massive stacks of cash together. So, hey, next, this has inspired me. Next manager meetings, I am going to lobby for cash payments. They're going to hate the idea and be upset that I suggested it here in a live audience. Cindy says, I had $77,000 of cash in my hand at once in the 70s when I worked in a bank. Yeah, I worked for Loomis Fargo. I delivered money and serviced ATMs. And so I handle just stacks of cash every day. And by the way, in case you were curious, the largest ATMs they make hold $160,000. That's the max. No more. No more. All right. That was a slight diversion on the subject matter. Did anybody have any other comments, suggestions, or stories of cash handling they'd like to discuss? No? Okay. All right. Moving on. I do want to cover, let's see, the buyer-broker agreement. The buyer-broker agreement. If you'll recall, the last time we talked about the listing agreement. And as a reminder, one of my sticking points, my own personal plea to all of you, is that hopefully everybody's seeing that buyer broker agreement, and I want to toggle that off. There we go. That's a little better. Everybody will recall I sort of went on a little rant about when the settlement occurred. My little rant was when the settlement occurred with our industry last year, and we had to redo how we offer compensations to buyer's agents, and we as buyer's agents had to have different conversations with our buyers. One of my it's becoming a pet peeve of mine is that we are still. I have the perspective that many of our agents are still negotiating the listing side commission with the perspective of the buyer's agent in mind. And you're like, Mike, of course we have to. That's part of the overall marketing plan that our seller, we highly recommend our seller offers buyer compensation. And I totally agree with you. But as a listing agent, your priority is negotiating your listing fee. And we negotiate those separately now. So just a quick reminder, negotiate your listing fee, settle that issue, then move on to the other fees that we charge and negotiate those. That's the advice. So, and I did say that the buyer's agent fee is the buyer and the buyer's agent's problem. And that's what the settlement is all about. It's the buyer's agent that needs to go and negotiate their own fee. And after it's all said and done, you know what? I feel better about the situation. And quite frankly, I don't know if there's any evidence that commissions went either way, but the only evidence that I've seen is that buyer's agents' fees have gone slightly up. So that's good. So anyway, I do want to talk about this, and if anybody has any problems presenting any portion of this, just let me know. We'll jump straight to it, and we'll talk about it. And we'll talk about scenarios and how we handle them. This is actually comes up quite a bit. Section 1.2. By the way, let me ask the audience, just poll the audience. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just curious. What is your default duration of the agreement, the buyer's agency agreement that you're putting in there? Are we doing 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? What do you feel is an appropriate amount of time for you personally when you're filling out 1.1 of that agreement? Looks like 6 months is the default. This does come up in some markets. Yeah, 6 months seems to be the default. I think that's pretty appropriate given the most timelines of a transaction. 6 months seems to be right where we need to be. This does come up at times. So the location, I don't know that I have a good explanation for 1.2 why we require. The first line of that, or the or part where we, if we're going to do a short term or only have buyer's agency on one particular piece of property, that makes really good sense, right? That's an option that is nice to have in certain circumstances where, hey, we're just establishing agency for 123 Main Street and that 123 Main Street only. But the line above it where we need to identify the geography in which we have the buyer broker agreement, I don't know why we have that necessarily. I don't know that I've ever had a really good explanation that just really hit home to me. But the bottom line is we do have it. And, I mean, of course we can list multiple counties, but at some point it does feel like, hey, if I want to, if I want to cover 6 counties, it seems a little weird. It seems a little awkward to put 6 counties in there. And you're saying if you are not an expert in the other place they may buy. Yeah, that's very true. That's a really good argument for it. And that, if you're a Park City agent and you've got a buyer that's looking in downtown Ogden, you're probably not the right person to be representing that individual on a downtown Ogden bungalow. If you don't have the perspective on the downtown Ogden bungalow market. But yeah, so you got to put a county there, and yeah, agents have missed that. Weber Davis, and they end up going to Box Elder County because they discovered that they like the pricing better. Well, guess what? You're not covered, and if you show a home up there, you've inadvertently violated the settlement agreement, and you've put yourself at jeopardy. So remember that when you write these, you should be overly broad, and one of the good lessons of that is, as a reminder, the Lyndon Larson rule. The Lyndon Larson rule, where if someone says, hey, I might buy new construction, we make sure our compensation would cover any potential larger fees for new construction, that 4%. It's a beautiful rule, and for all involved, it's the Lyndon Larson rule. Okay, so be aware of that. Go be overly broad there when you're talking about which counties that you are representing them at. Definitely worth your time. This box is always obviously important. The buyer does have a representation agreement with another brokerage for the following properties, and these properties are excluded from this exclusive buyer-broker agreement. So that's a really good way that you can overcome some scenarios. I don't think it's going to be used very often, but that is a way that you can overcome, hey, I got a buyer-broker agreement in place for just a single property. Okay, I can work with that. I can check a box. I can list that property. It's excluded. I'm being ethical, above board, and everybody knows what's going on. It's a really good option for you. But here, remember this. During the initial term of this exclusive buyer-broker agreement and any extension thereof, the buyer agrees not to enter into another buyer-broker agreement with another real estate agent or brokerage that conflicts with this exclusive buyer-broker agreement. In the event this exclusive buyer-broker agreement expires while the buyer is under contract on any real property identified, the company and the buyer mutually agree that the initial term shall automatically extend until the under contract transaction closes or is canceled. Many people often have questions about that. We have similar language on our listing agreement as we do here. As long as you have the agreement is in place when you're under contract, you are covered. Just FYI. So let's talk about this, the buyer's obligation to pay a brokerage fee. I want to kind of poll the audience here and see what your guys' feeling is on this. Are you getting any pushback on this section when you're telling people what your fee is for representing them as a buyer's agent? Is anybody getting any pushback here? If you would all chime in, I'd really appreciate it. I want to see several answers if possible. Felicia, when you say most of the time you're not, or most of the time you are?
I always get pushback on the fees.
Oh, when you negotiate the fee that you get when you're presenting it to your buyer?
Yes, they're always asking for a deal.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And your response is?
No.
Good response.
Have you hired me yet?
Hey, I feel like I talked about that recently. Linda says, or Kimmy says, some ask. Linda says, not so much. Explain what you do, and you should be golden. If you are getting some pushback and you're doing the whole song and dance buyer broker presentation, and it's frequent, I would suggest we have a sit down and I watch that presentation. Okay, because the one thing I will tell you is that my own personal experience, as I was kind of growing up in the business, and I had people that I could watch that were successful, and I sat in so many meetings and heard the language and heard their tone of voice and how they presented themselves, and I would try to replicate, and I thought I was, but when those same people heard me do it, they'd be like, that wasn't very good. You don't sound very confident, or they would give me advice that, they'd point me in a direction that, yeah, I was sort of hitting the main points, but I wasn't executing correctly. But I would never know unless they told me that. So yeah, Felicia, we should sit down, have that discussion. And also, some of this could be too that how we present, how we get paid, even just the single sentence in which we present it matters a lot, right? Because how we just say that thing matters, because it's the tone in our voice, our body language, and some people may pick up on it and go, oh, they're not feeling too hot about telling me that. I think I should ask for something different. I've definitely done that before, and I definitely did that many times. The one thing I will say, though, what Felicia was alluding to, not unless you're not unless you're hiring me thing. This is a reminder. This is just my opinion on negotiating things. If people are asking you for discounts, whether it be in a listing or the buyer's agency fee, if they ask you for a discount, I think the first thing that you should think of is, well, I don't give discounts to, this is in your head. You should think, I don't give discounts to people who I haven't hired me. Because it doesn't make sense, right? I mean, how would you feel if you offered the discount and then they said, great, I'm going to think about this for a week? Huge lost opportunity. That's the part of your job that you should not feel good about if that's happened to you. And not that you failed, because the reason I care about it is because everything I tell you, I care about it because I've done it and I screwed it up so many times. Okay? But when you switch it over and you say, well, that's a really interesting question. So are you saying that if I offered the discount, I'm hired? Is that what you're saying? And if they say, no, I'm just curious, then you say, well, that's fine. It's totally appropriate that you ask these questions. But quite frankly, I wouldn't negotiate my fee with anyone unless they've hired me. That makes a lot more sense to me. That if you agree to hire me, now let's talk about potential fees. I'm not telling you to sign the agreement and then we discuss the fee, because that would be weird. But unless I get a verbal agreement that, yeah, I'm your real estate agent, why would I negotiate this? Because it doesn't feel like you've hired me. And so my fee is 3% for this service. And if you say, hey, I'm the person for you, all right, is that the only thing we have left to talk about is the fee? Yes. All right, let's talk about the fee. Okay. Linda says, explain first what you do, why you are different, then say I typically get paid 3%. Then I ask what they would like me to be paid for what I will do for them. Man, that's bold. Linda's confident. She's just confident, man. What do you think I should be paid? I would never feel good enough to answer that question. I feel good enough to go, this is how much I get paid. And then I shut my mouth. That's my only strategy. I'm a one-trick pony. Kimmy says, I feel less is more. Just don't simply say, no, I don't discount. I work for 3%. Then, and this is me telling me, stop talking. Yeah, most real estate agents talk too damn much. I will say that. Scott says, agreed. I don't explain unless they push back. I will say that was one lesson I did learn early, but I was never. It was quite a while longer before I grew confident enough to kind of pull it off. But I did see these good old boy fee negotiation go on, and one side was saying, nah, you should do it for less. And the person I was there with sort of observing was like, no. Just like that. I was like, geez. And they were best friends like 10 minutes later, and he paid him what he wanted. So I was like, oh, so you can act like that and get the things you want. That's interesting. I mean, I can't do that, but you did it. But yeah, I personally like the less is more. I like the simplicity of it. It doesn't beg any more questions. And then there's also like, hey, I've explained to you what Linda's getting at in the chat. Linda asked the question, what less are you going to do? And I think Linda's referring to like, oh, so you want me to work for less, but you want me to do the same amount of work. That's the real question they're asking. They don't phrase it that way, but that's the real question they're asking. And it's a really good question. And you could pose it back to them. Well, so you want me to do what I just showed you for less than that? Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I don't think I can do that. That would be my personal response. Scott says, I made this deal with a friend once who had already identified the property, so he told me I'd have much less work. Not the case. We no longer had a BBA, but if he asked again, it would be a hard no. Oh, you want a discount agent? Yeah, I think too, when we talked about kind of the negotiation thing in sales meeting, part of that was the discount thing. And
People with the most money are the ones that tend to ask for discounts.
yeah, I will say that, knowing what I know now, I'm always going to ask. And quite frankly, I'm always going to ask if it's someone that's sort of like pitching their service to me for the first time and I don't know them. If I know them and I really trust them, I don't ask. I'm just like, what are you charging? Done. But if it's, if I'm establishing a relationship with someone and I'm sort of, jumping in feet first and I'm just, going to trust you on some faith that I have because you just pitched me something, I'm going to ask. Because part of it is I do want to see how you handle that question. And, I've been around the block enough to know that if you can't handle that simple question, I don't know that I necessarily want you handling something really important for me. But if you present it in a really strong way, then I'm like, okay, this is a person with some confidence and some capability and isn't a fool. So that's how I feel about those things personally. But on the discount part, when people, if people are getting really cheap on you and be like, well, this other guy will do it for 1.5, and they're talking about numbers that we all feel are ridiculous. My personal response to this is, oh, you want a discount agent? Well, for $300, I know a brokerage that'll put your listing on the MLS. It's only $300. I think that's what you should do. So take away, because how many of our clients really are thinking in their head, I want a cheap agent. That's what I want. I mean, some of them are, but not all of them. Most people want competence. They want a professional, and they're hoping you're that person. And they're also hoping that you'll get a competent professional for less money. We all, it's the pie in the sky thing. But take away that option, like immediately go, oh, I'm not that, but if you want that, I have somebody else for you. There's a stark contrast between those two things, and that's how you present that stark contrast, is offer them immediately. Oh, you want somebody who's cheap and doesn't do any work for you. I got that person right here. I got that for you, buddy. Anyway, all right, anybody have any questions surrounding, anybody have any concerns or issues or like to pose a scenario in which they're struggling to overcome some objections when they're negotiating their brokerage fee from a buyer's agent perspective? Now, I will pose this to the audience. It's definitely one thing to say, hey, no problem for me. I get 3% my buyer broker agreements every time. But the rubber does not hit the road at the buyer broker agreement. The rubber hits the road in the real estate purchase contract, in which we do lose control, some control of the scenario. Because, we've got our buyer's permission to write 3% in the purchase contract, but that does not mean that the seller is going to agree to it. So what is our strategy? And we only have 5 minutes left. What is your strategy when you write 3% and they counter back with a number that you will not accept? Because now it's back on your buyer. What is the language? How are we approaching our buyer with a counter of our real estate commission? Because this isn't the easiest thing to do. It's easier, I think, just to negotiate the fee up front. It's much more difficult to negotiate, to remind your buyer, hey, I know we could accept this and you get this house right now. Right? Because that's the scenario. Oh, I like all the other terms. Let's do it. Oh, hold on a second. Remember, I have to remind you that my fee's 3% and they countered back at 2.5. That's not an easy conversation to have. It's a very difficult conversation to have because it feels very self-serving, and I don't know how you would describe it any other way other than, hey, we negotiated this. We came to terms. We came to terms on what my fee is. My advice here is that before you write offers, you need to tell your client, hey, there's a decent chance they're going to counter back on my commission. And here's what I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to stick up for me one time. One time I'm asking you before we write any offers is you stick up for my commission. Just once. Which means when they counter back and they ask for more, we go back at them just one time and ask for my amount. And after that, I'm going to get the deal done for you. I think that's pretty fair. And quite frankly, I think it works a lot in our favor. And also to add to that, I don't think that's an unreasonable request at all, is that one time your buyers stick up for you. Debbie says, need to make sure you have the conversation when going over the BBA in the first place so it isn't a big surprise later. Yes. That buyer's presentation is where you handle this problem and to prepare them. If you don't, and if you forget, you will struggle with this part of the process. In that instance, you will not feel too hot about going, hey, yeah, we need to ask for more money from me. And you won't even feel very good saying it because this is the first time you've had the conversation. But if you provided the warning and told them about the future and how it likely will play out and how you need their support to handle that, they're going to support you. I think the vast majority of the time they're going to be like, yeah, let's go back. We're going to counter once and it's going to be the fee. And have I heard of instances where, yeah, it's happened to me once. I went back twice. Still took less on the second time. And the first time was at my request, and the second time my buyer offered to. Okay, to go back again. And we didn't win in the end, but we fought for it, and that's the best we can do. The best we can do. So it's 1:58. I hope I provided some value and didn't just ramble for 60 minutes, but you just never know. You just never know. Does anybody have any questions, problems, issues they're dealing with that they would like to pose to the audience? Or me? All right, y'all. And let me unshare, stop that share. Thanks so much for coming to Huddle. And I look forward to seeing everyone next week. Have a great Memorial weekend. And we'll see you on the flip side.